Now I'll turn things over to our partner at the Toronto Star because, of course, this is a Star Talk in partnership with that newspaper. And I'll bring up Bob Hepburn, who's the Director of Community Relations and Communications.
Thank you, Tina. A non-profit winery? Oh, and I love that. Anyway, thanks for coming out on what is a really miserable night. We've been doing these Star Talks with the library for about 4 or 5 years now, and we've had everyone from Rick Mercer to Margaret Trudeau. For the last 2 summers, and again this coming summer, we're taking Star Talks on the road to Stratford, where we interview actors right on stage, right after the performance. So take a look at this. It's a really fun event, and Stratford, the festival, people love doing it. So my role here tonight is to introduce Richard Ouzounian. He's going to formally introduce the creators of Arrabel. Richard has worked in the performing arts and arts journalism for 35 years. In that time, he has written, directed, or acted in more than 225 productions. And he served as artistic director of 5 major Canadian theaters and has been associate director of the Stratford Festival. Richard has taught and or directed at the University of British Columbia, Simon Fraser, the University of Winnipeg, George Brown College, and Sheridan College. And since the year 2000, he has been the chief theater critic for the Toronto Star. But Richard is prolific. He does celebrity profiles, did Celine Dion on Saturday in our paper, writes travel and restaurant features for us as well. He's also hosted a weekly CBC radio program on musical theater and has served as creative head of arts programming at TV Ontario. And in his spare time, and he does have some spare time, I'm told, he's written 6 books. Toronto Life called him the city's most influential critic. I'd go further and say Richard is Canada's most influential critic. Please welcome choreographer Sergio Trujillo, Tony Award-winning playwright John Weidman, Oscar-winning composer Gustavo Santaolalla, and Richard Ouzounian. Thank you.
I'm going to bring the gentlemen up one at a time because they are so spectacular. Usually I get one terrific person to talk to at these events. Tonight I have 3, so I'm going to talk fast so you don't have too much of me. When it comes to writing a musical, there's the book. And the great author William Goldman said, you know, writing the book for a musical is like putting the cake in flour. No one comes out and says, what great flour, but try to make the cake without it. And the gentleman we have here tonight is probably one of the master millers of flour in contemporary musical theater. He has written the book for 3 of the most interesting musicals I can think of, among many others, and I cherish them. They are Pacific Overtures, Assassins, and Contact. And a man who can do all of that deserves all of our attention and applause. John Weidman, please. Thank you. Now, John and I have met only once before. Our next guest is someone who I've had the very great good fortune of knowing for, oh gosh, maybe about 15 years now, I think. We both were working at the Stratford Festival. I was directing a show and he was choreographing another one, and we used to share cars back and forth in the city. And I thought he was this really nice guy, and then about 3 years later, he became this really big star who was choreographing every show in New York you could find. He has had, I think, 3 shows running at once simultaneously, 4 on Broadway. The one that you probably all remember the best and know and is still playing endlessly around the world is Jersey Boys. And he's the gentleman who's the major creative force here tonight, and he'll tell you a lot about it, Sergio Trujillo. And then someone who I did not know at all until a few minutes ago, and I'm thrilled to have here, is an incredible composer, a man who has his fingers in so many different types of music that he is obviously the only person who could possibly do a piece like this, which delves into tango, into extreme modern music, into elements of music theater, everything. He also, I guess, would probably come across your radar, if you're not into some of the more pronounced Latin music he does, as the man who had the phenomenal distinction of winning the Oscar 2 successive years in a row for Best Score for Brokeback Mountain and Babel. Could you welcome Gustavo Santaolalla? And I get to sit. The order tonight is predicated on the fact that Gustavo is going to play and sing later in the evening, so you have that to look forward to enormously. Sergio, let me fling the ball at you first. Where did it start?
Oh my goodness. 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I received a call from Scott Zeiger, the producer, chairman of Base Entertainment, which has produced various shows, including Jersey Boys in Vegas. And he said, I have a project that I'm interested in you working on, and that's using the music of Bajo Fondo. And I immediately jumped up because I had actually found that CD, the first CD of Bajo Fondo, 12 years before that. While I was researching some music for a ballet I was choreographing for a company in New York called Ballet Hispanico, and I found this CD, and I listened to the music, and I was blown away because it was tango, but like I had never heard it before. It was electronic, it was rock, but more important, it was very, very theatrical. And every song that I heard, as I listened to it the first time, I just imagined various stories that could be told through this music. So I said, someday I want to do something with this music. So cut to 12 years later, and I met with Gustavo in New York. Actually, I first went to the concert. They were performing at, where were you guys performing? At Highline Ballroom. And so one thing was hearing the music for the first time, and then, listening to it in my CD, and then watching them perform. I couldn't believe of the power and the force, and all of the things that how this music affected me. And so and John was there, and we were just both ecstatic about the possibilities that this music offered. And so Gustavo and I met the next day, and we immediately hit it off. It was like one of those connections that it was incredible. We call each other brothers because there's something really special.
Well, we found out later that we were born the same day.
So yes, the same day.
Not the same year, but the same day.
August 19th. We're both Leos. Anyway, so we met, we talked about the different possibilities of what it could be, and Gustavo had a treatment, an idea that he wanted of a story he wanted to tell, and I said, well, why don't I go to Buenos Aires and we can start to discuss. And so that was the beginning of it. That was November of 3 years ago. That was how it all started.
So you had music, you had the idea you wanted to tell a story. At what point in the process, John, did you start helping to shape things?
Well, I got the same phone call that Sergio did. Richard referred to Contact, which is a show I wrote, I guess about 15 years ago now, which was the primary storytelling vocabulary of the piece was dance. I did it with Susan Stroman, although it had a lot of dialogue in it. And so the person who gets the phone call when somebody has a dance musical in mind is me. Like clockwork, once every 5 years, somebody calls me and asks if I want to work on a dance piece. And Scott called me. I'd worked with Scott before. He asked me if I'd ever heard of Bajo Fondo. I said I hadn't. He said, well, come down to the Highline Ballroom and listen and see what you think. And just like Sergio, I was completely blown away by Gustavo's music. I listened to some of it, a recording before I went down there, but to watch these guys in performance, the energy and the intensity and the uniqueness of this sound and of this band was really thrilling. And it felt as though it had a kind of drive that would absolutely be compatible with a muscular story of some kind. And Gustavo had already designed the outline of a story which Sergio and I then started to sit down and talk about, rethink, what if we did it this way, what if we did it that way, but that was the beginning for me as well.
Now, what happens, and this is where I get fanatically interested in this story, is that instead of making it just something, oh, romantic, or, oh, we're in Argentina, we're doing the tango, and blah, 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 you guys settled on, you went to the elephant in the country, the major political incident that has happened in recent years, which was the dirty war, and with the generals, and decided to use this as kind of the thing that informed it. Sergio, do you want to start, or Gustavo, tackling that?
Well, I've always been very interested in the concept of identity as an artist and reflecting, who you are and where do you come from. And that's on one side. So I've been always very interested in the fusion in whatever I did as an artist or producing other artists, that somehow that concept was present. And I always work most of my career mixing Argentinian and Latin American folk music with rock, hip hop, electronic, all that. But tango was always something that I was very, very respectful. It's a genre that is very sophisticated on one hand, and then it's very popular in Argentina. And it was something that I always wanted to do something with. And that's how I'm going a little bit even further behind how Bajo Fondo started. Started because there was a moment in my life that I thought I really wanted to do something different with this genre, And I got together with my friend Juan Campodónico. He's from Uruguay, so the band is actually half Argentinian and half Uruguayan. And we both have, anyhow, we share part of that dirty history, as almost all countries in Latin America. And we lived through some really tough years. I grew up during those years, and it was very, very hard to see not only people, have, witnessed the disappearance of 30,000 people at the hands of the government, but somehow, being a victim of it. I've never, thank God, got hurt, but I was in jail since I was 15 years old many times just because I had long hair, or I was at a rock concert, or I was playing. And by the time I was 20, I was pretty popular there. So even when they took me to jail, they knew who I was, but they still made my life impossible, So, it came to me when we started with Bajo Fondo, started mixing all these things, that I always been very, very attracted to the world of dance. And I had, a long time ago, an experience with a great Argentinian choreographer, Oscar Araiz, many, many years ago. But I always been very interested in the world of dance. And I thought this music really, it would be great to do something. And it will be, and at the same time, parallel to that, I've always felt not really very fond of the typical tango shows. As you know, growing up in Argentina, you get the chance to see the real tango, and then you get always the version for tourists, or some things, that get put together and go around the world, but not really expressing the deep, sentiments of tango or our people. So I thought the combination of this music with a story that really will tell something real and truthful about what happened in this country could be really something else. And so I set myself to try to make this happen. I had an idea of a story, but just as Sergio and John told, I met with Sergio the following day to the performance, and it was just like that. We felt that we found each other, and at the same time we were conscious that we needed the help of somebody to that story, put it in shape and see what was working, and John had been instrumental and fundamental to make that happen. And really, we found ourselves collaborating in the most delightful and fruitful way. It's been really a wonderful trip to do this together and take it to this place. We've been working now for several years to make this happen, and we're very, very excited about the possibility of opening the show here in Toronto.
There are so many different issues with the particular war and the time with the generals, but what I think has come out to everybody here is the whole issue of the disappearing ones, the people who just vanished, and then there were the mothers of the Plaza de Mayo.
Well, we had a guy that was, at the head of the military junta, Jorge Rafael Videla, who actually coined that term. He came on national TV and said, these people are not in jail, these people are desaparecidos. They're disappeared. Imagine that for a family or something, to don't know, at least if your son or your daughter is in jail, or if it has been killed, at least just disappeared.
Kind of like stuff happens, isn't it? A word that kind of diminishes the situation.
Yeah. So that as you know, created a big, resistance from part of the of the population. Some people that were truly victims in the sense that they were not even, involved in an armed war against, but they just thought differently than the government, and they were also wiped out in the most horrendous, torture and everything that you can imagine. But there was a movement that grew up, a grassroots movement that has been also very important in the history of our country, that now has branched into different movements too, which was a movement originated by the mothers of the people that disappeared. So they started demonstrating in front of what is our White House. There is the Pink House, every Thursday, they start just to walk around. They found this iconic emblem, which was a white handkerchief in which they embroider the name of their sons or daughters. Some of them have lost several of their kids. And they hang the picture of them. I mean, and if that wasn't enough of a tragedy or a horrible situation, there was a horrendous individual named Astiz that actually infiltrated the mother and killed the founder members. I mean, got them killed, right? I mean, but the movement continued anyhow, and it was something that they somehow they couldn't stop. And I mean, those people have now been revindicated, and for the first time in Argentina, we just got to 30 years of democracy without a military coup. It's the first time in Argentina's history that we have 30 years of democracy. I mean, if you think about it, it's like, I mean, whether people agree with the government or don't agree with this government, and it's not about a political party, the fact is that it will be great to have diversity and have other political parties in power, but it is remarkable that we as a country, it's for the first time that we have 30 years, and mothers have been reivindicated, and somehow the people that have committed those atrocities are now in jail. They'll be judged as common delinquents, because there was a trial right when democracy came back, and they were found guilty, most of these people. But somehow, in another government that continued that government, they were given amnesty, so they were all free, and they never really served time. Now all these people have, they're in jail. They've been judged, and whoever they found, and they track them even outside of the country, they are being brought to justice, which for us it was very important, because somehow it gives reparation, and it gives a sense of closing to our story too. There is, even if it's not a happy ending, it's a true closing of the story. You found, now what happened to those kids or to those people, which is part of the story. Arrabal finds out what was the true story, what happened to her father, and now these people that somehow have been responsible for the disappearance of these people are in jail like common delinquents, like what they are, criminals.
John, with all this rich history, I guess you don't want to sit and turn it into a historical narrative, but how do you tackle elements of this story in dance?
Well, one of the things that I think you're aware of in the conversation that's taken place already is that, from my point of view as a writer, the task here was not to design a story and sort of apply it to somebody else's experience and somebody else's sensibility. This show has bubbled up from inside Argentina, through Gustavo, through the cast, all of whom are Argentine, and my task was to come in and try and be helpful in shaping and designing the story, rearranging elements, adding new elements, but Gustavo's presence was always the touchstone for what was appropriate, what felt right, what didn't feel right. We're all familiar with people who write plays or musicals about stories that take place elsewhere. I mean, Shakespeare wrote Julius Caesar. He wasn't a Roman, but this was an opportunity to work with somebody from the inside out on something that was deeply felt and authentically Argentine. And if you do what I do, which is to write books for musicals, which is like putting the flour in the cake, the real satisfactions that you get from the work have to be drawn from the process of creation. Because if the show's a hit, there's an old saying, they don't call them booksicles, they call them musicals. Yeah. And there's a reason for that. But the process of working on this was unlike working on anything else I've worked on because of the collaboration with Sergio and because of this authentic Argentine core. And it's been thrilling. I mean, and I must say, to me, when I first heard Bajo Fondo's music, it's got an intensity and an energy that felt as though it was compatible with the kind of story that Gustavo has described. It's got a pulse and a drive to it which is really electric. And it made the balance between a story that has a political platform, but which is also a coming-of-age story for a young girl who gets outside the house and sort of discovers what life can be about. It felt as though there was a perfect marriage between that story approach and the music that really initiated the project.
So Sergio, how does it all fit together?
Well, I want to piggyback on what John was talking about. You know, it's been a really unconventional way of creating a piece of theater because, you know, you and I talked a couple of months ago, and, you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show in Toronto, aside from it being my home, was that I felt like I needed to put it in front of a North American audience that could well, it was basically our place where we could try out and find out what works and what doesn't work, first and foremost. And so, but because it's an unconventional piece, you know, it's a dance theater piece that began with the music, because the music was the inspiration of it. And Bajo Fondo is a rock group. They're passionate, the music is raw, is in your face, but it's also beautiful. It's like all of a sudden, you could be hearing these incredible chords, and then all of a sudden just a beautiful violin will sweep in, or a bandoneon will come in. So it started from there, and as we were creating this piece, I always have to remind myself that was the seed. That's where it began, and then the dance took over. So how could we take that music and create a dance vocabulary that could fit that? Because it's not tango. It's not like traditional tango. It's not like the kind you see in a show, in a tango show. It's its own thing. So we had to create a vocabulary that Julio Zurita, who's my choreographer on the show, who's absolutely brilliant. He comes from the contemporary world, modern and contemporary world, has created just a language that absolutely fits Bajo Fondo's music. And then, so we took all of those, and then the sweeping story of this coming-of-age story set against the background of a political period, of a historical moment in Argentina's history. And so, unconventionally, when the producers approached me about working on it, they said, so we're going to do it in New York. And I said, no, we're doing it in Argentina. We're doing it with Argentinians, with Argentinian musicians, and luckily, you know, Scott and Jana, our producers, were courageous enough to take it upon themselves to, you know, let us travel there. I mean, I've been going back and forth 7 times already. And by the way, you have to go to Argentina. It's unbelievable. It is everything that they talk about. It's like visiting Paris in Latin America. I have fallen in love. I have just found my home. I'm Colombian by origin, but Argentina is my home. Argentina is my home. It's absolutely magical. So we got to Argentina. What's great about all of this is that I have never, so I've done Jersey Boys in Memphis and all of these other Next to Normal original shows, but I've never worked like this before. And it's actually been something that I was looking for, because, you know, you spend all of these years working on Broadway shows, and there's a format, and then this is how you do it. But all of a sudden, I got to Buenos Aires, and I just felt sort of so uninhibited, and sort of I could do. Everything was up for grabs, and so we created the show. We actually rehearsed the show in this place called La Catedral. La Catedral is the cathedral. It's a tango bar. They call them milongas, which is where you go and dance. And it's this warehouse that is worn down. The floors are hardwood floors. I mean, it's like I call it the Latin Moulin Rouge. It feels like that. It's decadent. It's amazing and dark. And there's chairs that are picked up from the garbage and tables that are makeshift, and they serve amazing food, amazing wine and drinks, and people just go there and dance. So that's where I rehearsed the show. And so in creating the show, it wasn't like I had a proscenium and I had a stage. I was actually rehearsing it at a tango bar. And for me, somebody who's looking for a new way of expressing myself, a new way of discovering who I am as a choreographer, director, it was like a playground. I was doing things in it that I would have never done had I had the pressures of doing a Broadway show, where you think, oh my God, this is a specific audience that is coming to see this show. They're expecting a certain thing. So because it has been so unconventional, the music, the dance, the story, and the setting of it, you know, it has liberated us, and I think it's you know, we're discovering, you know, we're creating a piece that I hope is unique in its own identity. I don't want to get pigeonholed into it being a musical, because it's tricky. It's a dance theater piece that tells a story purely through dance and music. And if there is any spoken or anything sung, is all in Spanish. So for a while there, I called it a tango rock opera. But there was nothing being sung, really. So even though there's like one song, but it's you know, so you know, in its identity, but what it is a theatrical experience, a dance theater piece using the music of Bajo Fondo with phenomenal dance, a coming-of-age story with a political backdrop of the Dirty War.
Again, another thing that reflects how different this story is in different levels, let's take the title. When most people hear it, they think it's the great author, and they say, oh yeah, I love his work. And we say, no, nothing to do with it, right? There's a couple of meanings to the title, aren't there?
Yes.
Well, it's basically, it's a term that you use it's a term that you'll find in a lot of tango lyrics, because it refers to the sort of an underworld, or a world that grew around the city. You know, those are the arrabales, el arrabal. So where people, I mean, there's definition when sometimes, you know, they have built a wall around cities and stuff, and people have sort of placed, established themselves a little bit out of the city. That can be the arrabal. So now it's a term but arrabal can be a feeling, a sentiment. You can say, I carry the arrabal with me, you know? So it's really a broad term that you can use it in different ways. But originally, that's what it means. It means like a sort of suburban neighborhood of a city, you know? And that's where lots of the tango was born originally, you know, where the people came from the countryside and mixed with the people of the city. And the first origins of tango, you know, is like the tangos from you know, that you hear in Gardel recordings and stuff. Those are all with guitars, because they were all people that were coming from the countryside. They were actually almost like folk musicians colliding with the urban landscape and creating this new music.
Does Arrabal have any connotations? Like you know, in America, North America, you say, oh yes, we have the ghetto, or we have the suburbs, and those words bring meanings with them. Does Arrabal have a level of meaning?
It is definitely a word in our culture, in Argentinian culture, because I know they have Arrabal too in Mexico and in Latin American countries. But in our country, it's a term that is very related to tango, you know, to the usually poor neighborhoods, you know, where people, you know, fight, you know, to make a living. And that's what it's. In this case, Arrabal it's a kind of a nickname that you know, Rodolfo, Arrabal's father, had given to his daughter. That's her name, Arrabal.
You just mentioned a twist in the plot I wanted to get to. John, we know we have this girl, and we know we have the history, but how do they work together? The girl is not in the past, is she?
No, one of the things that I think you can do when you're telling a story without language, or one of the things you have to do when you're telling a story without language, is to strive for absolute clarity, but also stories that are linear, I think, are much easier to deliver without language than stories which are more complicated. I mean, if you take this Robert Redford movie, All Is Lost, is a good example. There's no language in the movie at all, but the story really follows him from the first disaster on his boat to the end. We start the story in the past and follow the story through one night in Argentina, and then we flash forward 18 years, and at the end of that 18-year period, Arrabal, who was a baby in the beginning, is now a teenager, 18 years old, and we then follow her from that point through to the conclusion of the piece. So that's the structure of it.
Sergio, you're right now working here. Everything that began in Argentina with everything being so indigenous and working closely, now you're in Canada. Is it different to work with these people here, or how are they working?
Well, actually, before, just when I wanted to mention something that one of the things that was important as I was mentioning this place was, La Catedral, was to actually bring that to North America, to bring it to Canada. So in our design of the set is actually very close to what the La Catedral looks like. It's very much inspired by it, because I want to share that experience with everyone, because I think everyone should go there and experience this place. Sorry, just remind me, because I was so excited about saying that I forgot.
It's working. It's working now with all this Argentinian material in Toronto.
So but I brought all the Argentinians with me.
Right.
So when we're in it's actually, so now it feels like, to me, it's like, I tell them, now you're in my territory, because now I'm in my home. I was in your home, but now they're in, so, no, I feel very much, now, it's actually been also an unconventional creative team, because I've been working with my designers some of them are from New York, some of them are in Argentina, and some of them are in Canada. And so it's been absolutely chaotic in terms of figuring out when we have a meeting. Thank God for Skype. So it's at the Panasonic Theater in that space right now. I feel like the UN. So coming to Toronto, my hometown, bringing in visitors, Argentinians, my family from Argentina, and then bringing in all of the rest of my team who are from America, Canada, and Argentina. It feels like so it's again, unconventional, and somehow incredibly balanced.
Again, you hit on something. The Mirvishes have 4 theaters, and we've got the very nice, Ed Mirvish and the Royal Alex and the Princess of Wales, and then there's the Panasonic, which is scruffy, to use a nice term. But when we all heard that Arrabal was coming, we thought, oh, is it going to be which of the other 3 theaters? And they went, no, it's in the Panasonic. That obviously was your choice. That was your demand, actually, that it be in a place like that, right?
Yeah, I didn't, it's like, as I said to you, this show is not a proscenium type show. In the show, the audience actually, some of the audience gets to sit on stage. Because in a milonga, the tables surround the floor, and in La Catedral, that's how I staged the show. There was no stage. It was all on floor level, and the cast, the actors they go into the audience, and the audience at one point is asked to dance, and there's no pressure, but they're very, because I wanted as though the stories being told in a milonga, and so that space fit beautifully. And one thing that we discovered when I got there last week, when I got here last week, was that the Panasonic is hyped. It's so high we've actually embraced that. We haven't hid anything. It's actually the rawness of it that really has been incredibly useful, and I think it'll really enrich and help our story.
Yeah, it's hard actually to imagine that the show will ever look better any place than it does in the Panasonic. It looks as though the auditorium was designed to bleed into the set.
I was going to say, it fits perfect, because even, the height of it, that milonga is called the cathedral because it was a 100-year-old warehouse, and it's made out of wood, and it has a super high ceiling, this milonga in Buenos Aires. So this has that feeling too. And the fact, the walls, how the walls in the theater interact with the set and everything. And it's, the place is truly perfect for that.
Again, I'm curious, how do you combine the ethics of the various styles of music? That you're going to want to have spontaneity, and you're going to want to have freshness, but yet doesn't it have to have a certain sameness for theater every night?
Of course, it has, but that's something with Bajo Fondo. This is important too. we are a band, and we make records, we tour. For this particular case, I had to cast like another bajo fondo orchestra, but in what we play, either the Orquesta Bajofonderos, which are the guys that are here, or the group, we have a structured, time frame for the songs, but there's always room there for us to add something every night. There is a space to make it fresh, and that's what we do. I mean, that part of the music of Bajo Fondo is a combination of that sophisticated, perhaps writing and composing and sequencing with an element of freshness and energy that comes from the moment that the music gets played live. So our records, I think, have been very well received, actually, and yesterday were the American Grammys, but Latin Grammys a few months ago, we got 2 Grammys with our last record, but it's a different experience when you hear that music live. It's a totally different experience. Not that one is better than the other one, but definitely live has that extra energy that I think a show like this really benefits. I mean, you could have done the show with recorded music, and it would have worked. The choreography is beautiful, the set, the story is there, but I think the fact that you have the musicians playing that music live also adds, and they are on stage too. They're not in a pit. They are part of the show.
What's the full size of the company?
21. Jaina, 21? Oh, 22. I missed it by 1, see? Yes.
All on the Panasonic stage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
On stage and off the stage too.
And the audience that
And
gets
the
to be on
audience.
stage. So it's quite a large cast.
Let's pause for a second. Are there any questions from the audience before we push onward? Come to the microphone, please. Dennis?
First of all, gentlemen, welcome to Toronto. This is very exciting. It's great to have people of your talent assembled like this. My question is for Sergio. Sergio, I recall that you were on the road. I worked on Kiss of the Spider Woman, by the way. And I recall you were on the road with, as a chorus member, was that correct?
Yeah, I was, yep.
And for people who don't know, the character Valentine, of course, is an imprisoned revolutionary. And it's set during the era of the Desaparecidos, and the big song the day after that, of course.
Yes.
They all come out with the pictures and the candles. So there's your route to the issue. Now, was that your first introduction to the issue of Argentine politics and the Desaparecidos? And if not, or if yes, how did it grow now that you're doing a whole show based upon that?
Well, I grew up in I was born in Colombia, and I was there till I was 12 years old. So actually between 1976, up until 1976, but because my dad was so incredible, my family stayed back in Colombia, so I was very much aware of the politics at the time. So, and I knew, even as a child, we all knew about it. So I knew about it. My experience in the theater, yes, was in Kiss of a Spider Woman, and it did inspire. I think for me, what I admire about Kiss of a Spider Woman was the idea that the Kander and Ebb and Terrence had taken this very tricky idea and inspired, of course, by the Kiss of a Spider Woman. Who's the author?
Manuel Puig?
Manuel Puig, yes.
The funny thing is that Puig and Babenco is also both Argentinians. Babenco lived in Brazil and developed his career in Brazil, but he's originally Argentinian, and so is Puig.
So I think so. Doing a show like that, living in it every day. I mean, actually, there's a moment in the show where. Should I tell them about the torture? Yeah. There's somebody, just a little bit of background. There's one of the main character gets tortured, and I myself was actually in the show, and because of a Spider Woman, I used to get tortured, and at one point I actually die after I get tortured, and I climb up the fence, and every night I would have to kiss Chita Rivera, really long, passionate kiss before I died in a hang. But what that show did, that experience did, was it did inspire a wanting to tackle material such as that. I knew that while I was dancing, I knew that my dancing life I had a shelf life, and that I knew that I was going to choreograph, and I knew that I wanted to direct, and so. those kinds of themes, those kinds of ideas were very interesting to me, and I think so. It's part of my sort of ethnicity, just growing up in it, knowing about politics, living in a country where people are incredibly outspoken, and there is curfews and things that we're very lucky we don't experience in Canada. So all of those experiences have influenced me in wanting to tackle material such as this one. So yes, to some degree.
Thank you. Next question, please come to the mic.
Musical question to Gustavo. Tango traditionally, one of the traits of the music is it's kind of tied and in its articulation that is in itself tied to a very malleable use of time and rhythm. And that's the instrumental tango that we all heard from the 40s on. It's just
Correct.
has this kind of really back and forth, pull and push that what makes the group of tango just work. So when you work on the other side with music of like, drum and bass or like dub hop or electronica,
rhythmically more.
They're pulsating and a isochronous kind of pulse.
Yes.
How's the process of trying to work both those aesthetics that at some point seem totally irreconcilable, but what's the process to actually make them work in a sense that makes sense?
Got it. Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, we always try to make sure that people understand that we don't consider what we do tango with bajo fondo. We try to make a definition. We say, well, it's probably contemporary music of El Río de la Plata, that part of the world in which we combine everything that somehow has influenced us since we were kids. The music that our parents listened to, the music that we grew up listening, the music that we listen. And so it's from Juan D'Arienzo to Astor Piazzolla, from Aníbal Troilo to Radiohead, or to the Chemical Brothers, or Boards of Canada, There's all these elements sort of come together in the music of bajo fondo, but for example, there's an example of one of the pieces that it is actually part of Arrabal that is called Duro y Parejo, in which we actually play with that element. We're playing with a sort of a rhythmic, hypnotic sequence, and suddenly we stop, and it goes totally free time, totally out of sort of time of the tempo that we were playing, and then we recapture again that kind of groove. So we think that element of going back and forth of the tango is fantastic. We applied it in that song, but bajo fondo really doesn't do tangos. It's a combination of everything. Although in the show there are a few moments in which there is traditional tango, and the band plays with it too. So I mean, we have some moments in which you get that type of pacing. It is part of Arrabal too.
Thank you. Another question? Good. That leaves us more time for a concert.
I don't know if we describe it as a concert, but
You're going to
I'd love to do a
entertain
few
us
songs
with
for you if you
some selections. Do you want to say anything in advance about the music?
about what I'm going to play.
Yep.
About what I'm going to
Yep.
play. Yeah, sure. Well, I've been lucky enough to first of all to now be working with this great collaborators and. But I had the chance to get in the work to work in films. I grew up as a singer-songwriter, and I started making records as a producer and as an artist not that long ago, but when I was 16 years old. And I never thought about it. I always loved movies, but I never thought that I was going to end up somehow involved in making music for movies. And that happened really kind of not by accident, but without really me planning it. One thing led to another one, and suddenly I was doing Amores Perros, and suddenly Alejandro González Iñárritu was saying, you should meet this friend of mine. He's doing a movie about Ernesto Guevara, the Motorcycle Diaries, and that's how I did. And then we were presenting that movie in Sundance, and somebody said, Gustavo should meet Ang Lee because he's doing, Brokeback Mountain, and, he should. So I'm going to play a few things. I'm not going to play something from Arrabal because we need bajo fondo for that, so I can't do that. But I will play something from the Motorcycle Diaries, and I will play something from Brokeback Mountain, and then I will play a song of mine from Argentina.
Excellent.
How about that?
Thank you. And while he's getting ready, we have another treat for you. The Mervish organization are making 2 pair of tickets available to Arrabal. And can I ask Sergio and John to each pick one? So get your stubs ready.
Looking.
John, take one. And would you read the number, please?
817526.
Very good. Do we have a winner over there? Great. Tina, you going to take care of them? Great. And Sergio, you can pick one.
I am. I reached right down to the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh, lower number. 817514. Yes. Lucky winner. Come and pick up your ticket.
Oh, Tina, the other one is over there. Yep, very good. You saw it here. Free tickets from the Mervishes. It'll be in the news tomorrow. That's good. Great.
And by the way, you're not expected to know tango in the show. So when you are asked to dance, when you come, do not be afraid. It's a very, very impromptu moment. So you will not. So you don't have to go off rushing to take lessons. And we actually offer lessons before the show starts. Okay. So yes, from 7:15 to 8 o'clock. So. And then you go segue right into the show.
And you will be getting the lessons from members of the company. This is the most attractive group of human beings you will ever see in one place at one time. Come early.
And there's wine.
Yes, yeah, and
okay.
And there is in the spirit of course La Catedral during the show people can drink, and at moments during the show. Not the whole theater has tables, so the front part of the theater has tables, and there's tables on stage. So there is specific moments in the show where you can actually order drinks, and they'll bring you wine and beer. So it's in the spirit of a real milonga. That's what will happen in the show.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. And Gustavo, over to you now.
Okay. So thank you so much for being here. This instrument is called ronroco. It's in the family of the charangos. I use it quite a bit in the scores that I do. So this one is De Ushuaia a La Quiaca from the Motorcycle Diaries.
Thank you so much.
The reason to write books for musicals is so that you get to collaborate with something that sounds like that.
Can you turn down the monitor a little bit, please? Thank you. So this one is a song from Brokeback Mountain. It's called "A Love That Will Never Grow Old." Go to sleep, let your sweet dreams come true. Just lay back in my arm for one more night. Got this crazy old notion that calls me sometimes, saying this one's the love of your life. 'Cause I know a love that will never grow old. And I know a love that will never grow old. When you wake up, the world may have changed, but trusting me, I'll never falter or fail. Just a smile in your eyes, it can light up the night. And you're like wind in my sail. 'Cause I know a love that will never grow old. And I know a love that will never grow old. Lean on me, let our hearts beating time feel strength from these arms that have held you so long. Who cares where we go in this rugged old road, in a world that may say that we're wrong? 'Cause I know a love that will never grow old. And I know a love that will never grow old. Thank you. Is the guitar sounding out there? Yeah. Cool. So, just to finish, once again, thank you so much, and thank you, Bass, and everybody, Entertainment, and everybody at the library, and everybody at Mirvish. Hope we see you there at Arrabal. This is a song based in an Argentinian rhythm called Carnavalito. It's called Río de las Penas. De esta orilla del río, te veo, me ves, nos vemos. Tú
mirada en mi mirada y el río siempre en el medio, y el río siempre en el medio. Tus ojos llegan tantas palomitas mensajeras, trayéndome la esperanza sobre el río de las penas, sobre el río de las penas. Y cuando el sol no seque las lágrimas de los ojos, nacerán dos nubes blancas de tu mejilla y mi rostro, que en un luminoso vuelo se unirán en el cielo, que en un luminoso vuelo se unirán en el cielo. Rosita de la montaña, tus labios quiero besarte. Gracias a este río nada más que mirarte, nada más que mirarte. De aquella orilla del río, tu corazón se agita. Mientras tanto el mío, dale que grita, dale que grita, que grita. Y cuando el sol no seque las lágrimas de los ojos, nacerán dos nubes blancas de tu mejilla y mi rostro, que en un luminoso vuelo se unirán en el cielo, que en un luminoso vuelo se unirán en el cielo. Tus ojos llegan tantas palomitas mensajeras, trayéndome la esperanza sobre el río de las penas, 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 sobre el río de las penas.
Oh.
Thank you.
I think we'd all have to agree we're very lucky to have these three gentlemen working in our city at this moment.
Thank you, Richard.
Good.
Thank you.
So, Gustavo, Sergio, John, thank you for being here, and I hope you return the favor by going to see Arrabal. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.